What's up, killers? It is your final grandma coming at you from my killer spooky cast. And happy Halloween. Naturally, today we're going to be getting into the Halloween spirit and we're going to be talking monsters. We're going to be talking a particular kind of monster, one of the cooler ones, and that is werewolves. So, if that sounds groovy to you, stay tuned. What's up, everybody? Thank you so much for joining me today. If you are new here, you might not know that I am not just Mel from My Killer Podcast. I am also the Rad Hatter from the Rad Pack podcast, and we just did a stream maybe like a week or so ago. We did one of our more popular episodes. We did a versus episode, and it was American Werewolf in Paris versus Cursed. Two werewolf movies battled it out to see which one was the better movie. Of course, Cursed won. Despite how hard I was trying to pump the other movie. So coming off of that episode, I wanted to do a werewolf video for Halloween. It was going to be a 10 best, but I decided to change it up a little bit and do something a little more gruesome, a little more gross, a little more slimy. So we're going to be talking about 10 best werewolf transformations of all time. Needless to say, this took a lot of research. I watched a lot of movies, and there is some criteria involved in how I determined these are just my opinions, folks, on which movies had the best werewolf transformations. So some of the criteria that I was looking for is mainly they had to be practical effects, or if they weren't mainly practical, the CGI that was used in them had to be minimal, or at least had to be somewhat realistic looking. I also was looking for creativity here, folks, because let's be honest, werewolf movies get kind of a bad rap, and it's mainly based off of those transformations, or it's based off of how the werewolves themselves look. It's based off of the makeup. It's based off of the costumes, and a lot of times they tend to not look great. The transformations don't turn out well. A lot of times they cheat and they use a lot of CGI effects and it doesn't work out. And there's a lot of bad werewolf movies out there because of this. But there are some great ones out there because of this too. And those are the movies that we're going to talk about today. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that the movies on this list are the best movies of all time, because they're probably not. And I'm not going to sit here and tell you that these are my favorite werewolf movies of all time, because some of them probably are not. But what I am going to tell you is that these are the best transformations that I have found in the research that I did. Do I like some schlocky werewolf movies that have bad CGI? Yes, I do. So that is a different list for a different day. So some of the movies on this list are going to be very famous movies that you are going to recognize immediately. Some of the movies on this list are going to be hidden gems that maybe you have never heard of before. And there's one in particular on this list that might surprise you. So without any further ado, let's get into the gruesome, gory, terrifying sliminess of this video. These are in somewhat of an order. I am going to start from 10 and go to 1. So starting off at number 10 is Wolf Cop. This one is on the list particularly for its hilarity. Because I am Slightly inappropriate. Wolf Cop is from 2014. It's a horror comedy written and directed by Lowell Dean. An alcoholic cop blacks out and wakes up in an unfamiliar surroundings, and crime scenes seem oddly familiar when the full moon is out. This movie is hilarious, and it's cheesy B horror at its finest. The particular wolf transformation scene in this movie happens in a bathroom when said cop is taking a piss. You don't particularly see the wolf transform in its entirety, but in this particular movie, it does embrace the retro style practical effects instead of using computer-generated imagery, and this is the only movie, probably ever, to really embrace and feature a full transformation of a wolf penis. I'm already foreseeing this video not being monetized, so what the fuck ever. This movie is hilarious, specifically for this scene alone. I had to put it on the list. You get full frontal werewolf penis transformation. I had to put that on the list because they did such a great job. Number 9 is Late Phases. I'm assuming this is going to be a hidden gem to most of you. I watched this movie. It is a slow, beautiful burn, and I highly recommend you check it out if you haven't seen it. Late Phases is a 2014 horror fantasy, and it was directed by Adrian Garcia Baglino. A retirement community is plagued by mysterious and deadly attacks until a blind war veteran moves in, rallies the residents, and discovers a beast is behind the killings. The special effects artist in this movie is Robert Kurtzman. He is the one that conceives a single shot gliding back and forth between two characters. One is transforming into a werewolf. The other one is observing the transformation of this werewolf. This scene uses practical effects and clever editing to accomplish what it does. The transformation is outstanding. There is a particular part where the werewolf rips half of its face off. It is amazing. This movie does use a small bit of CGI in this transformation, but I don't mind it because it does look realistic enough and it is creative enough that it looks outstanding. What this movie was able to accomplish in this transformation scene, I have mad respect for, considering the fact that this movie came out in 2014, which is well past the time that all practical effects went out the window and people were just throwing CGI into movies left and right and didn't give a shit. I absolutely love the fact that this transformation looked the way that it did. And this movie is good. It's actually good. So, it made the list at number 9. Definitely check it out if you haven't seen it. And at number 8 is Silver Bullet. I know some of you are gonna say that the transformation in this movie isn't good, and you might be a little right about that. The werewolf itself doesn't look great, and the transformation is very short. But I put it on the list because of the use of practical effects, first and foremost, and the werewolf itself looks good enough, and the fact that a lot of other movies look worse than this one does and uses CGI, I put it on the list, and my love for this movie outweighs everything else. Silver Bullet is 1985 horror mystery directed by Dan Attis. When a series of unexplained murders occurs in a normally quiet town of Tarker's Mill, the residents decide to hunt down the killer. However, many of these vigilantes end up dead, and those who don't are closer to finding an assailant. But a young wheelchair-using boy named Marty encounters a werewolf one night. The pieces begin to come together. Along with his sister and Uncle Red, Marty begins a mission to capture the werewolf once and for all. The werewolf in this movie, Stephen King asked for it to be plain and hard to see, in contrast to the hulking monsters seen in other werewolf films during this time. But because of this, it resulted in a creature looking more like a black bear. Carlo Rambaldi designed the werewolf suit in this movie. It was formed out of practical effects and was a man wearing a suit. So it didn't actually look quite as good as the director wanted it to, but they went with it. Everett McGill was the one wearing the suit in the movie, so his performance did make it. But in the end, a combination of Rambaldi's skills and McGill's performance, it ended up being a pretty good werewolf transformation. I absolutely love Silver Bullet. I think the werewolf in this movie is scary. Once you sit down and watch the movie all together, I think it turned out pretty good. It is scary to me, and I love this movie, and if you haven't seen it, I'm sure pretty much everyone has seen this movie by now. It's a fan favorite. Next up on the list at number 7 is A Company of Wolves. I'm pretty sure everybody remembers the cover art of this one. It is the one with the man and his mouth is open and the wolf's snout is coming out of his mouth. I always remembered that cover art. It is really hard to forget. The Company of Wolves is a 1984 horror fantasy directed by Neil Jordan. Wolves and werewolves lurk throughout the dreams of young Rosaline, who imagines that she must journey through the dark forest to live with her grandmother. When Rosaline meets a rugged hunter in the woods, she discovers that she has an animal-like attraction to him, leading to the macabre turn of events. The film won awards for Best Film and Best Special Effects in 1985 International Fantasy Film Awards and was nominated for the BAFTA Awards for costume design, makeup, production design, art, direction, and special visual effects. Anton Furst and Christopher Tucker were the ones that worked on the special effects. Christopher Tucker worked on the Elephant Man, which helped set up the design for the werewolves. The transformation scene in this movie was pretty gruesome. It starts off with a man and he's ripping his own skin off, and then the snout of a wolf comes through his mouth. Practical effects are absolutely amazing in this movie, and that transformation scene is ooey gooey gross. Number 6 on the list, and I actually forgot about this one, and if it wouldn't have been for me receiving this 4K in the mail literally the other day, I would have totally forgot about this part of the movie and maybe wouldn't even have ended up on my list. But number 6 is Trick or Treat. Yes! I'm sure you all remember the surprise party scene. Trick or Treat is a 2007 horror comedy written and directed by Michael Daughtry. Interwoven stories demonstrate some of the traditions that are best not forgotten as residents of a small town face real ghosts and goblins on Halloween. The surprise party scene is where the werewolf transformation happens. I'm sure you all remember Anne Paquin is walking through the woods and she's attacked by a vampire, but quickly turns the tables on him and drags him to the quote-unquote surprise party, where then all of the women proceed to transform into werewolves. This scene is on the list because of its sheer creativity and practicality. They're merely ripping their skin off their bodies as if they're taking their clothes off. I thought this was so cool and so creative, and I totally forgot about it. And they're exposing their wolfy arms and legs, all haired out underneath their flesh. And the practical effects of the flesh coming off looks super cool. Stylistically, this looks great to me. Coming in at number 5 is a TV show. This one is another hidden gem on the list because I doubt there's many of you that have probably seen this one. I've heard of maybe a couple people talking about it. It's called Hemlock Grove, and it stars Bill Skarsgård, which is the only reason why I've even seen it. It only lasted 3 seasons. If I can be frank with you, like the first couple seasons of this TV show were really good. The 3rd season got pretty weird. Like, I don't know that I would have continued watching it had it been many more seasons after that just because of how weird the third season got. Hemlock Grove is a 2013 horror Netflix TV show. It lasted 3 seasons. It was created by Brian McGreevy. It was developed by Brian McGreevy and Lee Shipman, and it was produced by Eli Roth. The Netflix original series revolves around a peculiar residents and killer creatures of Hemlock Grove, a dilapidated former steel town in Pennsylvania. The town is composed of people living in poverty and those who are extremely wealthy, and everyone has a secret. As sinister mysteries unfold, a seamier side of town is exposed, placing suspicion on many and revealing that nothing is what it seems. This particular werewolf transformation is one of the more gruesome ones that I have seen. This one shows the werewolf splitting out of the skin from the inside, and you see all of the bits and pieces of the human falling off. You see the human teeth falling off and the eyeballs falling out and the skin falling off. And then once the werewolf bursts from the inside, it eats its own flesh and body afterwards. This particular transformation was actually a mix of actual prosthetics and CGI. This is the only one on the list that has the most CGI used, but this is the most realistic CGI I have seen when it comes to werewolf transformations. Therefore, I was okay with putting it on the list, and I was okay with putting it where it ended up on the list. This transformation looks really good, and it's scary, and it's gross. The fact that they used quite a bit of CGI on it doesn't bother me because the way it ended up looking in the end is fantastic. This is the transformation from season 1. The transformation from season 2 looks even better. If you haven't seen the TV show, I mean, I'm not going to recommend you watch it because it's been over and done with forever. And like I said, that 3rd season was kind of weird, but if you want to check out the transformation for the first one and the second one, you can find them on YouTube. All right, coming in at number 4 is Ginger Snaps. Yeah, of course this one had to make the list. Ginger Snaps is a 2000 horror fantasy directed by John Fawcett. A story of 2 outcast sisters, Ginger and Bridget, in the mindless suburban town of Bailey Downs. On the night of Ginger's first period, she is savagely attacked by a wild creature. Ginger's wounds miraculously heal, and something is not quite right. Now Bridget must save her sister and save herself. Fawcett insisted on not using CGI. A lot of the practical effects were proven to be not great for the actors. They were hard to wear, they were causing blurry vision and hindered speeches and runny noses and things like that. But in the end, the final product looked fantastic. And that transformation scene, though a lot of it was kind of off screen, what we did get to see was amazing, and it was ooey and it was gooey and it was slimy and it was perfect, and we got to see just enough of it for it to be really effective. And then that final werewolf was just, it was different than the werewolves that we usually get, and I think that was really great because we got something new and something creative. Ginger Snaps was a great movie, and it's a great story, and it's something different than all the other movies that we usually see. And from what I understand, the marketing of this movie kind of killed it a little bit. It took this movie a really long time to get from Canada to the US, and therefore it lost a little bit of headway by the time it got here, but it has a huge cult following now, so that is a win. And this transformation, top tier. Coming in at number 3 might surprise some of you, and that is Fright Night. What? Bet you didn't think a vampire movie was gonna make a werewolf list, did ya? So this one isn't necessarily a werewolf transformation. It is a werewolf de-transformation. And yes, that is Evil Ed's de-transformation at the end of the movie. Fright Night is a 1985 horror comedy written and directed by Tom Holland. Teenage Charlie Brewster is a horror film junkie, so it's no surprise that when a reclusive new neighbor moves next door, Brewster becomes convinced he is a vampire. It's also no surprise when nobody believes him. After strange events begin to occur, Charlie has no choice but to turn to the only person who could possibly help: washed-up television vampire killer Peter Vincent. In this movie, the makeup for Evil Ed's wolf transformation took 18 hours, and there was actually an accident on set where one of the chemicals that was poured into his mouth to create saliva was accidentally switched out with something that was more like an adhesive, and his mouth was therefore glued shut, which was probably a godsend on set because his character was so annoying. The de-transformation of Evil Ed's character to me was actually one of the more sad parts of the movie. His screams and the pain that he goes through and that is portrayed in this de-transformation was actually quite sad. But the practical effects and every minute of those 18 hours was worth it because it was very, very effective scene. Ended up looking very, very good. You guys can probably guess the last two on the list because they're very notable movies. And I probably don't need to say a lot about them. But coming in at number 2 is The Howling. The Howling is a 1981 horror indie film directed by Joe Dante. In Los Angeles, television journalist Karen White is traumatized in the course of aiding the police in their arrest of a serial killer. Her doctor recommends that she attend an isolated psychiatric retreat led by Dr. George Wagner. While Karen is undergoing therapy, her colleague Chris investigates the bizarre circumstances surrounding her shock. When his work leads him to suspect the supernatural, he begins to fear for Karen's life. The special effects in this movie were state-of-the-art at the time. The transformation scenes were created by Rob Bottin. Rick Baker was originally supposed to do the special effects for this movie, but he left the production to go work on American Werewolf in London. All of the special effects in this movie were done practical, and Bottin's on-screen transformation of Eddie was celebrated. This transformation was all time. It is horrifying. It is amazing. They used all kinds of different practical effects to create this. It does last for an extended period of time, but it is very effective and it is very horrifying. This is one of those scenes that is memorable and everybody knows the scene when you talk about it. This is one of those movies that every movie after it was trying to mimic that one scene. So that is why The Howling is at number 2. Number 1, the number 1 werewolf transformation of all time. Say it with me. American Werewolf in London. Yes. 1981 horror comedy written and directed by John Landis. David and Jack, 2 American college students, are backpacking through Britain when a large wolf attacks them. David survives with a bite and Jack is brutally killed. David heals in a hospital and is plagued by violent nightmares of his mutilated friend, who warns David that he is becoming a werewolf. When David discovers the horrible truth, he contemplates committing suicide before the next full moon causes him to transform from man to murderous beast. This is the movie that Rick Baker quit The Howling to go do, and it was well worth his while. He won an Academy Award for the makeup effects and design and creation of this film. The sequence of the transformation in this movie took a week to shoot. There was all kinds of things going on in the sequence of this transformation, loads of practical effects. David Naughton was half of his body was in the practical effects animatronic suit and half of his body was underneath the floor. His performance alone was also part of the reason why this transformation was so effective. His anguished screams, his performance, his facial expressions, everything came together to create this whole scene, this whole transformation scene that makes this movie so iconic. Nobody thinks about werewolf movies without thinking about American Werewolf in London first. And it's because of this scene. Nobody makes a werewolf movie without thinking about this transformation. And it will never be replicated. All right, guys, we did it. That is 10 of the best werewolf transformation scenes of all time. I don't know if I want to say of all time. I guess in my own humble opinion. I don't know. Kill the comments below and let me know. What were your favorite werewolf transformation scenes? If they did not make this list, did I tell you of any movies that you haven't seen before and that you need to watch? Did I miss any? Kill the comments below and tell me, did I miss any? Tell me if I missed any. But happy Halloween. Stay safe out there. Always check your candy, folks. But thank you so much for hanging out with me. Till the next time we gather. Have a killer day. Peace.